You're listening to the Hawke Media podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and executives crush the digital marketing game. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's get into the show.
All right, you're listening to HawkeTalk. I'm here today with Chris Klug. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks, Erik.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. And so always like to start in the hospital, you're born, do you immediately jump on a snowboard and just start racing down the halls? Take me back. Where did it all start?
Erik, I was an avid skateboarder as a kid.
You were?
Had a vert ramp in my backyard that my father and I built, and was also on the ski team as a youngster.
And where were you? Where did you grow up?
I was born here in Colorado, grew up in Bend, Oregon, and
Nice.
started skiing in Vail, and then skiing on Mount Bachelor.
And were your
And
parents
saw the,
big? Were they
Go
big?
ahead, sorry.
Were your parents big extreme sports people or skiers?
Not at all. My dad's from Chicago. My mom's from Philadelphia, both very enthusiastic skiers. And my mom's got the old Arlberg ski style with her skis just an inch apart. It's hysterical. Yeah. But no, they're both really, I don't know if anyone enjoys skiing more than my father. He just has a smile ear to ear every time he's out there, but
Awesome.
not an expert skier by any means, but really enjoys it. And so they got started at a really early age. As soon as I could walk, I was on skis at age 2, just like my kids. That's what you do in mountain towns.
Yep.
But I saw the very first snowboard and I said, that's skateboarding on snow and I've got to try it.
And so I'm curious, going back to that, just real quick with the vert ramp and everything, what caused your dad to want to support you that much with skateboarding? It's okay. You're a kid, you want to skateboard, fine. But to actually, it happens. It's not that uncommon, but still, what drove your dad to wanting to push you on the skateboard?
He was an awesome dad, and could just see that that's something I was passionate about. And,
Yep.
and he has a woodworking and sort of a craftsman background, was always good at building stuff. And I think it was a great project for a father and son. And so we did it. And I think it's the adage that, if your kids are doing things, you want them doing it at your house.
Yeah.
So you can, be involved and be a part of that. And great lessons learned for me as a father of a 7 and 10-year-old now that are both ironically into skateboarding and snowboarding and skiing and all of the above. But yeah, it was just a neat thing that we did together. And I was signed up for the ski team. My mom, signed me up for the ski team. My brother was doing that, and that seemed like the path. And then in the middle of pursuing that, I was only, 10 years old, 9, 10 years old. But in the middle of that, I saw the very first Burton backhill.
Yep.
And I said, wait a second here. I got to try that. And my mom's like, what? I just signed you up for the ski team. I just invested in this whole program. And I'm like, Mom, I got a snowboard. And I was such an avid skateboarder that I looked at it and I said, that's skateboarding on snow. I've got to try it. And I did. And, this was in the early 80s. I'm dating myself a little bit, but it was glorified shaped pieces of plywood, leash that went to the nose of the board, moon boots, duct tape, and bungee strap bindings. But, I just fell in love with it. That sensation of tipping a snowboard on edge and floating through the POW. That's all you could ride in the early days, because the Burton Performer that I got for that Christmas had a water ski skag down the middle and 2 rudders on each side. It was ridiculous. And the bindings were mounted about maybe 4, 5, 6 inches from the swallowtail end of the snowboard. It was pretty funny.
Yep. And not customizable at that point, I assume. You can set the bindings, slide them back where you want them, depending on the type of snow. It's just hanging on for dear life.
Every snowboard outing was customizable, was an opportunity to improve your equipment, to improve your technique, and a new adventure. And you'd see another snowboarder on Mount Bachelor and you just gravitate to each other.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to meet them, but immediately you're looking down at their equipment, like, what are you doing with your boots? What are you doing with your bindings? Where are you positioning them?
Yeah.
And you felt like you were really on the forefront of something special.
Yeah.
And we were all trying to figure it out. So as much as not only would you check out each other's equipment and share ideas and collaborate, but then you'd go ride together.
Yeah.
And I remember when Damian Sanders came to Mount Bachelor and I was a little grom, and chasing him around was just like a highlight of my childhood. He was such a ripper, and I got to ride with him. And then Craig Kelly, Mikey Ranquet, Kelly Joe Lagaz, all of these guys, Robbie Morrow, Shannon Melhuse, Michelle Taggart, all of the Salem crew came down to Central Oregon and rode, and Craig Kelly and the Washington crew came down and lived there for a few winters. And so I was the young Grom chasing all these guys around and got to follow my heroes and mentors and some of the best snowboarders in the world.
And I was going to ask, like, at what point, obviously you fell in love with it like day one, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so at what point did you go, this is going to be my career?
You know, Erik, I heard people say years later, could you, or ask me the question, would you ever have imagined that snowboarding is where it is today? 22-foot, perfectly dragon cut pipes, and the level of riding we're seeing at the X Games and the Olympics, and the participation that we see today, and the kind of equipment that we laugh about where I started and where it is today. You and I just talked about our favorite Burton snowboards, and I ride a Custom X, and the technology that's gone into that. People say, could you ever imagine where the sport is today? And I said, yes. If I could have bought stock in snowboarding the first day I started, I would have. I knew it was going to explode because I fell in love with it the first day I tried it. And I'm, 30 years later, still love it just as much as the day I started back in the early 80s.
That's awesome. And so at what point did you start like taking it to another level and competing? How were you, is it right away? Did you start joining like whatever local competition there was, or?
Yeah, Mount Bachelor hosted an early competition that included a racing event and some early freestyle events. And one of the neat things in the early years, you showed up with one snowboard and you competed in all of the events on that snowboard. And the overall was a pretty prestigious title. And like every sport, snowboarding was trying to figure out the right competition formula. So early years, we had moguls, we had kind of the racing event, which would typically be like a Marlboro ski challenge, like a dual giant slalom. We had then, of course, the early half pipes where we dig it with a shovel and then judge each other, which was pretty funny. And then in later years, they started to develop, some of the earliest versions of border cross.
And so how old were you in that first competition?
Say it again.
How old were you for that first competition?
Well, I started snowboarding at about 9-10 years old. And a few years later, I saw the earliest competitions pop up. So I was probably in, 11, 12 years old.
Yeah, got it. And so you're in middle school, you're starting to go into high school. Like, were you starting to think, what are you going to do with your life? As you said, you knew it was going all the way, but did you, at that point already, were you like, I'm just going to be a snowboarder, I don't need college, or like, how were you looking at it?
Good question. Really, from those earliest competitions, then I started competing all over the Northwest Series. Did the legendary Mount Baker Bank Slalom many times, did all of the Northwest Series events. My father took me out to Breckenridge for the World Championships and got to race against, all the best European racers. And I was still just a young American Grom, just trying to figure it out. And but guys like Kevin Delaney and Dave Dowd, and of course, as I mentioned, Craig Kelly, Sean Palmer, all of the best racers, freestylers, all of the best riders in the world were there. And that was a real eye opener for me that, hey, this is a sport that, I'd like to get better at and compete at the highest level. And so I really pursued that, got to do US Opens as a junior rider out at Stratton Mountain, Vermont. And then I went on the Body Glove Nissan US Pro Tour and competed on that through high school. And then in 1990, did my first International World Cup over in Garmisch-Partenkirchen in Germany. And in 1991, this is really an interesting story. I had an opportunity to go play small college football and really enjoyed my college football years. When you compete in an individual sport, and then you play a team sport, you so enjoy the camaraderie and the teamwork and the collective goal of 11 guys working together towards trying to get across the finish line or the goal line in this case. And I really enjoyed that.
What position were you?
I'm sorry?
What position did you play?
I played quarterback.
Nice.
And I had some opportunities to play small college football. And my heart was really in the snowboarding. So I actually went and did a PG year at Deerfield Academy back in Massachusetts. And to play football, continue my academics, and decide, all right, am I going off to college to play football, or am I going to pursue the snowboarding? And that winter in 1990-91, I won the World Cup full time, and was on the World Cup for 20 years. And my heart just told me that's what I wanted to do. And it was probably at that time not a very smart decision, because snowboarding was really in its infancy. Olympics weren't on the horizon. There was only a handful of guys that were making a living doing it. And I turned down a fantastic education at Trinity College and later at Middlebury College to pursue the snowboarding circuit. And I'll tell you what, it was the greatest education in the world. I got to travel the world on my snowboard, doing what I love to do, and ultimately participate in 3 Winter Olympic Games, and travel the world for 20 years, living out of a suit.
Yeah, not bad.
Where it all worked out.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, in those early days when you say, how are your parents first off? Were they like, we get it, we know our son, he's going to go snowboard and that's not something we're going to fight? Or were they like, you should go to college, back up, there's no money in this? How are they reactive to it? No,
super supportive. They could tell where my heart was and how, how enthusiastic I was about it. And they just, I think that you have an opportunity to speak to so many people, and you've had such success in your career that you can see when somebody's so passionate about something. And I think that's the essence of, for me, my success. There were so many guys that were more talented than me in the early years, but I just loved it. And I wasn't afraid of working really hard. And I think if you've got that passion and that work ethic, you can do anything.
Yep. Totally agree. And yeah, I think that's probably what life's about. Like, you could have taken another path and not done what you're passionate about, not done what your life calling was and what you love. And, you just wouldn't have lived as great of a life. Like, it's just that it is that simple sometimes. And so those early years when there wasn't a lot of money in it, like, were you getting by off the prize money, off of sponsors, or how were you getting by, so to speak, in those early years when snowboarding was still just getting going?
I started on a Burton back hill, and then a performer. My performer that's right behind me here.
That's awesome.
Next to my guitars. And then I
got my guitars right here, but
I love it.
The snowboard's still down in.
I'm sure you're much better than me. I'm better on the snowboard than I am on the guitar, but
I would actually argue that you're probably better on both. But I have done both at the same time.
Nice.
I took my guitar snowboarding once up in what was it? Up in Tahoe, one of the mountains. I forgot which one. But yeah, Heavenly. That's what it was. We were riding Heavenly, and I brought my snowboard with me, or my guitar with me. It was fun.
That's talent right there. I actually rode for Burton in the early 90s, kind of right out of high school, and signed with them, and was with them for my whole career.
Nice.
And so I was able to pursue, my World Cup dreams, and they helped support me. And then, but it was really tight. I mean, I would really take the winnings, and that would sort of sustain me through my summer and off-season training, and enable me to, again, pursue this whole snowboarding dream. And it wasn't cheap. I mean, to do the whole World Cup season was, for a kid out of high school, was $25,000-$30,000. And it was tight, but it was also super fun.
Yeah. And so at what point did you hit a point where you started making okay money, or was it really just tight through the Olympics, through all of it?
No, for me, the real turning point was when I won the US Open in 1997. And then they announced that the IOC announced that snowboarding would be an Olympic sport in 1998.
Got it.
And I won the first 2 Olympic qualifiers and was headed to Nagano, Japan, as the first ever US Olympic snowboarder. And it was, I ended up 6th place there. And that was kind of the first time I really started making some money in snowboarding, and was able to not just get to the next season.
Yeah, got it. And was that through sponsors, or was it actually the money that the IOC created? Or
both through primarily sponsors and winnings.
And so, talking about, you go to the Olympics, it's the first time it's ever been in the Olympics. You're coming in as the guy to beat, right?
I won the 2 qualifiers right before the Olympics and was definitely riding pretty well. And I don't know if I was a favorite, but maybe a contender would be the right description.
And not to dig in, but I know at least getting on podium is a big thing, or a medal at the Olympics. When you did something happen that put you in 6th, or was it just there were a lot of great snowboarders and you happened to hit 6th?
I was off to a great start in Nagano. I was in the silver medal position after the first run, and in a great position to, as you said, bring home a shiny necklace on the second run. And you recognize at the Olympics that it's the Super Bowl of winter sports, and that everybody's going for their best performance and trying to bring home a medal. And I never accomplished anything great in my life without some risk and without going for it. And so that second run, I put my foot on the gas and hammered down. On the top section, I was actually in the gold medal position, having a fantastic top half of the course. And the bottom half, I hooked my arm in one of the gates that we turn around, sort of spun me sideways and lost my speed. But when you're racing, you don't call timeout and try to fix it. You just keep fighting for that finish line. And I reached down and tried to trip the timer and stop the clock, and hoping and praying it'd be enough to stay on the podium. And unfortunately in Nagano, it was 6th place. And I shared the story with you previously, but I was just devastated. I was at the bottom of Mount Yakibatai in Shigakogen, Japan. And I looked up at the scoreboard and it said 6th place. And I thought, man, how did I just blow that opportunity? This could very well be a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. And I had some other serious health concerns going on with a failing liver, and was actually at that time on a transplant waiting list for a life-saving liver transplant. And so not only do the Olympics come around every 4 years, and you may or may not qualify in 4 years, but I was also dealing with some other health challenges and didn't know if I'd be alive or around in 4 years.
Yep. And to talk about the liver, so when did you learn there was something wrong with your liver? Was it right before the Olympics? Did you go into this with this weight on your chest as well, or?
It's kind of in the early mid 90s. I was diagnosed through a routine physical and showed high liver enzymes. I didn't know what the hell a liver enzyme was. I said, well, more's better, right, doc? And he said, not in this case. Took us about 1.5 years to diagnose what it was. At that time, they sent me down to Denver and the liver specialist down there, and they confirmed that it was a condition called PSC, the same thing that led to the death of one of my boyhood football heroes, Walter Payton, and sat me down and told me that I had this condition and one day I need a liver transplant. I remember looking around the room thinking, who are they talking to? They can't be talking to me.
Yeah,
I feel like $1 million.
Literally,
I'm getting ready for the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly.
I was in total denial, and took me quite a few years to realize that they were actually right.
Yeah. Did you have any symptoms of it at that point in the Olympics, or were you still you knew the science, but you didn't really feel it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was totally asymptomatic and felt like $1 million and was doing what I love to do. Yeah. And they didn't really know the timeline on it, but they said eventually you're going to need a transplant. And
got it.
I was put on the transplant waiting list and waited for about 6 years. Finally got that call in 2000. And
so just post Olympics. So before the next Olympics. Yeah. And did you have plans? So you finished in 6th. Did you go? How long did it take you to go, well, screw it, I want to go again? Or were you just immediately like, well, I got to give it another shot? Like, where was your head at?
Yeah. in the finish line, 2 seconds after I crossed the finish and was taking my snowboard off and heading for the exit corral, I said, I'm coming back in 4 years. I'm going to get the job done. I knew, of course, that Salt Lake City had been awarded the 2002 Olympics, and 6 hours from my home in Aspen, Colorado, I said, I'm going to be there. Yeah. And this time I'm not coming up short. I'm bringing home an Olympic medal.
Nice. And then a year later, you end up in surgery to get a new liver. And were you still did you know that was coming when you were leaving there? Were you still confident? Like, I'm still going to the Olympics. I new liver, whatever, this major surgery, I'll recover. I'll be fine. Like, how was your head going into that?
I think I was still somewhat in denial in 1998.
Sometimes that's a good thing, to be honest.
Yeah. But I was on a waiting list and knew that eventually, I didn't know if it was 1 or 5 or 10 years down the road, but knew eventually that I'd have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And as it was in the summer of 2000, my health really deteriorated. And
so you did actually feel the condition at that point. It wasn't just, we know this is coming, so we're going to replace it.
No, in the spring and summer of 2000, I lost about 35 pounds and actually became a little jaundiced and was really my hematocrit, your red blood cell count, dropped to about half of what it typically is. And I don't know how many more weeks or months that I had, but my health was deteriorating fast.
Got it. And so they found you someone.
They did. A young 13-year-old boy that died in a gunshot accident in Denver saved my life and 2 others. And July 28th, I got a liver transplant in 2000 and really had a miraculous recovery. I was out of the hospital 4 days later, no infection, no rejection, and was back on a stationary bike just a few days later. And
few days. So you got a cut open, I'm assuming, like somewhere in your chest cavity.
Yeah, from my sternum all the way down to my right oblique. Looks like a great white took a big bite out of the middle of me.
Yeah, so huge.
It's the most expensive tattoo in the world.
And with that, you got on an exercise bike a few days later.
Yeah, I was able to just ride a light stationary bike a few days later and did like some light isometric arm exercises. And my doc said, listen, just walk a lot, walk all over the place for the first couple months.
Yeah.
So we walked to a Rockies game, to the Broncos training practice. We walked to and watched the international PGA event in Colorado that year out in Castle Pines. And I remember following Ernie Els and Vijay Singh less than a week after a life-saving liver transplant. Yeah. And we got to the 18th hole, and I'm following all these guys. My transplant doc said to walk, and we got to the 18th hole, and they finished the tournament. I just laid down on the side of the 18th green. I was so smoked. So I probably
that was probably so good for the healing though, because it gets your blood moving. I know that I've broken enough bones and injured myself enough that I know just moving your body, the healing process takes off a lot faster.
100%, and that's what I did really for 6 or 7 weeks. Just walked all over the place.
Yeah.
And then 7 weeks later, my transplant doc said, I don't want you back on a snowboard for 8 weeks. And 7 weeks later, I was back at the Palmer Snowfield at Mount Hood.
And is that your personality? Like, you're like, I'm not going to quite listen to you.
Well, I was eager. He knew that I was ready to get out and test drive this new engine. And 7 weeks later, I was back on my snowboard.
You got a liver transplant, and a week out, you're walking around the golf course, and you're, on one of the PGA Tour courses, and it basically collapsed at the end of it. Not as bad as it sounds, but it sounded like you just laid down and needed to catch your breath. Take it from there. What happened next?
My mantra of more is always better might have led to overdoing a little bit at the Castle Pines PGA event. But my transplant doc, this classic Israeli guy, Dr. Yigal Kam, who I absolutely love. I went in and saw him right when I was diagnosed, and he sat me down and reviewed all of my liver numbers and panel. And I was really, really excited for the 2002 Olympics. I came up short in 1998. I said, I'm coming back in 4 years. I'm going to get the job done. And I said, I was just firing questions at Dr. Kam. I said, is it possible, doc? Can I do it? And he just said in his really classic, almost Marlon Brando type voice, he said, listen, I don't see why not. It's never been done, but I don't see why not. And oftentimes
that's a great doctor, by the way, that's going to come in and because most of the time they're like, no bedside manner. They're not here to motivate you. They're here to be realists. And they're like, like that's usually what you get from a doctor.
You know what? And I think as a patient, there's going to be some bumps in the road and some adversity and challenges along the way, but oftentimes you just want a chance. And there was light at the end of the tunnel for me. And I said, listen, I think we can do this. And for me, just setting my mind to something in my career, whether it's business or health or sport, and just pushing all the chips in, being fully committed to that goal. Like I said yesterday in our conversation, I never accomplished anything great without some risk in my life.
Yeah.
But anything that I did that was great with my real estate business, with getting through my medical challenges with my liver transplant, And in my, 25-year snowboarding career, I was all in, and I was all in on this. And I bought into it and said, I'm going to train for this race for my life, just like I did for my Olympic run and my snowboarding career. And I think that was a huge part of me getting through it and getting to the other side. But it was funny, after I had a miraculous recovery. I was out of the hospital in 4 days, riding a stationary bike a week later, and snowboarding about 7 weeks later, even though Dr. Kalm told me, listen, I don't want you on a snowboard for 8 weeks. He could tell that I was so excited, ready to get out there, test drive.
If you moved around enough, you can accelerate that. You can accelerate that healing process a week if you move around and you're on a bike. I think you're probably all right.
I was excited to get out there and, like I said, test drive that new engine. And
I'll say, how was that?
He kept me on a tight leash, but I jumped the gun by a week and was snowboarding 7 weeks later.
And so, how was that? Like testing the new engine? How did it feel?
Yeah, it was amazing. You realize how important your core strength is to any motor skill, balance type sport, skiing, snowboarding, skateboarding, all the board sports that I love.
Yeah.
And I literally got cut in half from my sternum to my right oblique. And so I felt like Gumby. And I remember snowboarding back at the Palmer Snowfield at Mount Hood, back up on snowboard, and just loving that sensation of making big, like giant slalom radius, fast arcing turns down the Palmer Snowfield, and just loving Erik being back there doing what I love so much. I do recall a cartwheel tomahawk fall, maybe day 2 or day 3. And I got up and I was like, oh God, is my liver still there? I was nervous that I'd opened up my zipper, but it was all good. And
how long did you have that zipper, by the way? The whatever the staples or the stitches in there.
Yeah, I had those in there, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks or something. And I think it was
so that was all out. So
yeah, I'm joking, but it was like 36 staples, and I joke it's the most expensive tattoo in the world, and one I'm very, very proud of.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so you start snowboarding. Were you at that point like, yeah, totally, I'm gonna go back to the Olympics in 2 years? Like, I'm good, liver's good, we're good to go. Like, did you have full optimism on what was next?
100%. The second I woke up at 7 West on the recovery floor at University Hospital.
Oh, wow.
I woke up and I said, oh, that's how it's supposed to feel. And I knew.
So you felt the difference right then.
100%. I never realized that I was running around with such a compromised liver. And when they stuck a brand new, perfectly functioning liver in me, I knew the minute I woke up. I said, oh, that's how it's supposed to feel. And there was, Erik, no doubt in my mind that I was going to make it back.
Wow. That's awesome. And
I didn't know I was going to make it back to my Olympics and win an Olympic medal, but I knew I was going to make it back and at least have the opportunity to do so. So all of that was icing on the cake just a year and a half later.
And so I was going to say, 7 weeks later, you're snowboarding. How quickly did you actually go back into full training for the Olympics, other than just riding a little bit?
Yeah, just a few months, 2-3 months. It took me probably 6 months to fully build my core strength and stabilizing muscles back. But I did win my first World Cup in San Candido, Italy, in the Dolomites, 6 months after my life-saving liver transplant. And
you did. So you entered a World Cup, and 6 months after one of the more major surgeries you can pretty much have, and you won.
I won, and that was really special for me because it was my first World Cup podium after my life-saving liver transplant. And the day before, I was really struggling to my dog is outside getting excited about this story as well. She's barking in the background. I was really struggling with how to thank my donor family. And they had given me this incredible gift and this second chance, and really made the most heroic and selfless decision that anyone can make, and saved my life and 2 others. All the while, they'd lost their young 13-year-old boy in a gunshot accident in Denver. And I really struggled with, how do you thank somebody for that? And I'm alive and I'm returning to the sport that I love and my Olympic dreams and my family, and they'd lost their young boy. And I think that's one of the real challenges of organ donation for the recipients, is maybe a little bit of survivor's guilt, if you will. And I wrote them, I'd struggled with a letter. I really wanted to write them, but a simple thank you just didn't seem adequate. And I wrote them a letter the day before winning that World Cup, and just said, I thank God every day for being here. And I thank you for the second chance at life. And I'm doing what I love to do because of you and your heroic decision. And that was a huge weight off my shoulders, and won my first World Cup the next day, and then got to meet them in person 18 months later in Salt Lake City when I won my bronze medal.
Oh, so they brought them out to the Olympics?
They did. They came to the Olympics. They watched me win my bronze in Park City. And the next day we got together, I got to put my bronze medal around their neck and thank them in person. And I have to say I was more nervous for that than my Olympic race.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's hard. It's hard to, what do you do for that person kind of thing? But
we just hugged it out pretty much. And, we're all grateful that, Billy Flood, my donor, lived on in his legacy, and I was here, and we were celebrating life, making the most of a very challenging and traumatic situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so
that's the miracle of organ donation, that donors say yes, not at an easy time. And we pay tribute to them really as transplant recipients and everything that we do, and trying to pass it on and pay it forward to make sure that every other person has a chance that's in need for a life-saving transplant today has a chance to get one.
Yeah. And it's crazy how we've turned our bodies and like with technology into like cars, where it's like, oh, I just got a new liver, I got a new this, like that is something. And now they're talking about, would they just grow a pig kidney or something?
They did. You're exactly right. And it seemed to have had a very successful launch. So
yeah,
at 48 years old, in 2010, I was 37 years old, the only snowboarder with gray hair at the Vancouver Olympics. And I thought, all right, 20 years, 3 Olympics, living out of a suitcase and riding my snowboard around the world for 20 years, probably time for me to try something else. And now at 48, talking about spare parts, all my action sports buddies that, in their late 40s are getting new hips and new knees and new shoulders.
Absolutely.
So we're all bionic.
Yeah, that happens. So going back to the Olympics, so you first off, I'm curious on that World Cup that you won 6 months in. You were saying your abs weren't even fully back yet, right? Like you weren't fully trained by the time you did that World Cup. Is that fair, or were you peak condition at that point?
I blew my knee out horribly in '98 on my birthday of all days, November 18th. And
oh, happy birthday soon on the 14th.
Yeah, it's coming up. I'm getting older. And I blew my knee out horribly, ACL, LCL, MCL, and had a huge surgery and was out for the 98-99 season. And that recovered, and I was back on a snowboard about 4 months later. But I was told that it takes at least a full year for that whole recovery, and to where you don't have like random swelling or something in your knee or where they had the surgery. And so, yes, I was snowboarding at 7 weeks after my transplant and won a World Cup 6 months later. But I don't know if I was 100% in terms of core strength and full, muscle recovery.
Well, that's why I ask. I'm curious. Is it that you just had the innate technique? Because in an athletic sport like that, you're competing against people in their peak condition. And so for you to win and you're not in peak condition, do you think it's just you had that history and training and technique that you didn't? It was the mental.
I think it was determination, mental toughness, and I think just the will, for me, I barely qualified for the 2002 Olympics. I sort of screwed up on the first few qualifiers and came right down to the wire, and fortunately performed well at the last couple of qualifiers and just snuck into the 2002 Olympics as the final.
And that's after placing first in the qualifiers, the Olympics before too.
Exactly.
Right?
The Olympics before. I won the first two. I was the first ever named U.S. Olympic snowboarder, and didn't even have to perform at the third one. And then this time I left it for the last couple and just barely got in. And I remember when I got in, I just said, I've done something nobody else has ever done. I'm the first organ transplant recipient, Olympian. I might as well go win a damn medal now. Nobody's expecting me to do so. It's on our home turf in Salt Lake City, 6 hours from my home in Aspen, Colorado. I'm going to do it.
Yep.
I've never had clarity like that before. And you and I talked before about visualization and setting your mind to something. And we know how powerful that is in sports. But I experienced that when I was on that 7 West recovery floor at University Hospital. And I was hooked up to all kinds of machines and IVs and all sorts of things. And I just was laying there in the bed, seeing myself snowboarding again at Palmer Snowfield at Mount Hood, making those big, beautiful turns. And 7 weeks later, I was. And I woke up that day on February 16th, which was ironically National Donor Day. And woke up on February 16th, 2002. And I said, I'm winning a medal today. And fought through all the rounds and pulled it off on my friend Peekaboo Streets run in Park City Resort.
It's amazing. And so you were that confident, you went in there, you felt fully prepared to at that point, right?
I was, I was in good form. And again, we had 25,000 people at the bottom of Peekaboo Street's run there in Park City, and a lot cheering for an American to win a medal that day, and the first ever medal in snowboard racing.
Yeah.
And I felt great. It was sort of this magical day too, Erik, where it was sunny, but yet you had kind of these crystals falling down. It looked like a Disney scene. It was unbelievable.
Oh, that's cool.
Just beautiful bluebird, Utah.
And how that sticks with you. Yeah. And how that sticks with you too is awesome.
And everybody was stoked. It was a great show, and the hugest crowd we'd ever seen at at Olympic snowboard race. And it was really fun. And of course, all my friends came over from Aspen, my donor family, everybody that was a part of that. And I felt like that day I was riding down and everybody was on my back and helping me get there.
Amazing. And so how was the feeling? You get down there. Last time you experienced it, you turned around, you were in 6th place. This time you turn around. What were you in 3rd right away, or were you up higher and got beat? Like what was
it was a little bit of a different format where we ran a head-to-head sort of March Madness type format. And I worked my way through the rounds and ended up in the small final, racing for 3rd or 4th. And I knew what it was like to come up short in 1998, finishing in 6th in Nagano in snowboarding's first Olympics. And albeit 4th is a great accomplishment, and I was there to bring home an Olympic medal. And so that was the toughest race of the day.
Yeah. And at what point in that race did you know you were going to win? Were you right away, or did you not realize it till the end? Like what point were you like, wow, I got this? Well,
one of the most dramatic moments in 2002 for me was, a little 50-cent plastic buckle over the instep of my race boot exploding on my first run. And after repairing that with duct tape and getting in the start line. And
so you actually had your snowboard duct taped on?
Yeah, my boot. When I race, I wear like a hard shell plastic boot.
Yeah.
When I'm free riding, I'm just in your regular, Burton drivers or Ions or a leather free ride boot. But this day I'm in my race boots, and a buckle that I'd never broken in my career exploded on the first run, and I had to resort to a pipe fastener and duct tape to hold it all together and get me to the start line of that second run. And I would say, to answer your question, when did I know? About halfway down the second run. I was really fast on the lower section of Peekaboo's run all day long. It helped me get through a couple of really tight races and get through a few tough rounds. And about halfway down, I started to smile a little bit, and I thought, I've got him. And I was racing one of my best friends, Nicolas Huet from France. And I started to smile, and I thought, this is my race. I'm winning a medal today. And then the next thought that entered my mind was, don't smile, you idiot, get to the finish line.
Yeah, focus.
Kept riding and Superman into that crowd of about 25,000 people, and was just pumping my fist. And it was a huge party at the end. And I felt badly for my friend Nick, because I knew what that feeling was like coming up short in 1998 as I was parading towards or exiting the finish corral, uttering a few 4-letter words under my breath in 98 in Nagano. So I gave him a big hug. And, that's what's so special about snowboarding. I got involved in it, as we talked yesterday, in the really early years when it was duct tape, moon boots, and glorified shaped pieces of plywood. Yeah. And even at the highest level of the sport, you saw that camaraderie and that friendship emerge. Even in a tough situation, when one guy wins a medal and the other doesn't, we're still high-fiving. And that's the spirit of our sport. That's what drew me into it in the beginning. And it's still my favorite thing in the world to do. And my passion for board sports started with skateboarding, led to snowboarding. Now I'm an avid kiter, foiler, skateboarding again with my kids, riding my one wheel. And I love that sensation of standing sideways on a board, and that centrifugal force sensation of tipping it up on edge and making a heel side and a toe side, or front side and a back side on my surfboard. It's just one of the greatest feelings in the world, that feeling of a bottom turn or a deep powder arc through the snow, floating through there. And I can't get enough of it, Erik. It's something I fell in love with when I was 9 or 10 years old. And here I am turning 49 years old soon. And it's still my favorite thing to do.
No, that's amazing. And so speaking of which, so you finished the Olympics in 2002. How long did you stick with snowboarding as a professional?
Well, I started my real first year on the Snowboard World Cup was 1991.
Yeah.
1990-91. I did an earlier World Cup prior to that, at the Breckenridge. I think it was 1987 World Championships. But started competing a few years after I started, around mid 80s.
Yeah.
And retired after the 2010 Olympics. That was my.
So you did two more. You went to 2 more Olympics after that.
I did. Yeah, I missed 2006 in Torino, Italy. Went there in a broadcasting role, and that was also a great experience and really fun. And then
what was the reason for missing it? How come you didn't?
I just didn't perform at
got it.
At a level to qualify.
Got it.
And so that was a little bit of humble pie, but also a good experience. And I built on that, and then bounced back in 2010. With my good friend, my late friend Dave Lagashoots. He sponsored us, and he started together with his friend Hooters. And I went in 2010 with an independent team with the coach of my choice and my favorite wax technician, a former teammate, and qualified for the 2010 Olympics as Team Hooters. And I'm sure the IOC and the U.S. snowboard team loved that. We had Hooters emblazoned down our speed suits.
That's perfect.
The whole season, and it was so fun. Great way to go out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, did you know what you wanted to do next? Like, were you ready to retire at that point? Like, you can still ride for fun all the time, but you're like, I'm done. I've got there. You said you were one of the only guys standing up there with gray hair.
Yeah, I was 37 years old in 2010. Finished in 7th place at the Vancouver Olympics in the pissing rain. And really, Erik, I'd done everything I wanted to do. It's always great to win every single race, which I didn't. I had plenty of ugly ones and plenty of podium finishes and efforts I was really proud of. But at that time, I'd done everything I wanted to do and wanted to start a family and move on and start a business. It's interesting. A few years earlier, my late friend, Gary Albert, who was a great mentor to me, drugged me in to meet with 2 guys that owned the local Aspen Snowmass Sotheby's franchise. Mm-hmm. And Gary Albert was a genius. He was kind of the genius behind the distribution and creation of Cabbage Patch Kids. Oh, wow. And we nicknamed him the Toy Maker, and he crushed it in business. And sadly, we lost him a few years ago. But he said, Chris, I watched my friends in the Philadelphia, New Jersey area. He was really good friends with Ron Jaworski and with the basketball star. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And he saw them sort of struggle with that transition. Mm-hmm. And not that I was making the NBA or NFL kind of money or acclaim that those guys did, but he said, listen, I want you to use this career as a springboard into whatever you're doing next. Yeah. So a few years earlier, in around 2007-8, he drugged me in and said, you should talk to these guys that own the local Sotheby's franchise. You should get your real estate license. This is a great career for you. And I went in kicking and screaming. I didn't want to. And he took me in there, and I left, and I said, damn it, Gary, you're right. These guys are super cool, and this would be a great fit. And got my license, got my feet wet, got a few deals done that helped fund and get me to the 2010 Olympics. And then I retired and started my real estate business. And 10 years later, I'm an owner together with those guys of Aspen Snowmass Sotheby's. And I'll tell you, Erik, so many lessons I learned on my snowboard and competing at a high level in athletics. There's so many parallels between athletics and a lot of the tough lessons I learned there, and a lot of the recipes for success, if you will, or the formulas to being great on your snowboard. It really correlates with being successful in business. And now I've got my cake and I'm eating it too.
Well, and I was going to say, it's funny. I heard the other day, I was talking, I don't remember who the conversation was with, but it was, someone that was asking me about myself. I think it was a meeting I was in somewhere. And she goes, oh, do you like extreme sports? Like, do you mountain bike? Do you snowboard? Do you do that kind of stuff? I'm like, oh yeah. She's like, you ever been heliboarding? I'm like, oh yeah. And she's like, yeah, you're a typical entrepreneur. I'm like, yeah, I took it back. Like, what do you mean? Like, and then I thought about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I mostly go on those trips with other friends that run companies. And there's something about, in a positive way, I'm going to say it's a thirst for life that I think extreme sports athletes and entrepreneurs have, that it's like, you 100%. Take this crazy risk, whether it's financial risk, personal risk, bodily harm risk, but it's an appetite for risk that you have that I think actually translates, that you're like, yeah, it's risk, but I do feel like I control the risk, because it's not blindly jumping into something, going snowboarding and hauling down a mountain. You're the one controlling it still. And yes, there are risks, but you feel like you've got most of the risk is on your back. And I think that that goes with business or with extreme sports.
I couldn't agree more. And you look at what makes a great athlete. It's not just one thing. Look at somebody at the top of their game, like a Michaela Schifrin or a Tom Brady or Serena Williams or somebody that's truly great, Gretzky in his heyday, or Joe Montana, you name it. It's not just one thing. These guys have the mental toughness. They've got obviously the physical skills, the motor skills, they've got the diet, the mental aspect dialed. They've got, they know every position on the field and what everybody's doing. They're all in and they're training. Everything is just a percentage better. And at the end of the day, you see someone like Jean-Claude Keely or Ingemar Stenmark in their heyday, or Tomba, or you name it, whatever sport in their heyday, they're not doing one thing better that's leading to their dominance. They're doing 5, 6, 7, 10 things better. Like Tom Brady's a perfect example. He's defying father time and the NFL quarterback position. And you can see it's his sleep, it's his diet, it's his mental toughness. It's all of these things that lead to, kicking somebody's butt in a race by a second or two, which Michaela Schifrin do all the time. And there's just same thing in business and entrepreneurism is really, you're doing a lot of things that you're controlling and trying to do better. And so I love it. And as I was saying, I have my cake and eat it too. I get to split board and ride my snowboard on the best powder days. I ride almost every day and get to raise my family here in Snowmass Village and Aspen Snowmass and do what I love to do. So I feel very fortunate and love welcoming friends like yourself to the Roaring Fork Valley and making turns together. I'm not racing anymore. I'm just cruising with friends and having fun, enjoying the ride.
Yeah, I'll definitely be enjoying the ride. I'll see if I can keep up, but probably not.
You're always welcome.
So last two questions for you. Number one, what's next? You've built out this now decade-long real estate career. You're still snowboarding. What do you think is coming next for you?
My life's mission is changing the landscape for organ donation, ensuring that everyone that needs a transplant can get one. And we started right after 2002. In 2003, we started the Chris Klug Foundation that's dedicated to helping those in need of a life-saving transplant and helping inspire those too that have gone through the transplant process. And that's my life's mission. I love my sales and marketing business. I love living here and raising my kids. And I'll tell you, to digress for a second, there is nothing better than snowboarding with my kids. I've done all those things that you talked about, heliboarding and backcountry snowboarding and touring all the mountains, the Elk Range above our cabin. And I'll tell you, going out and riding with my kids and following them is an absolute highlight of my life right now. And so I hope I'm always standing sideways and enjoying the ride, whatever board sport it is, on the water or the snow. Going to keep working hard and enjoying my real estate sales business the next decade while I'm raising my kids here, and ultimately eliminating the wait for anyone in need of a life-saving transplant. That's my goal.
That's amazing.
Ultimately, probably spend a little more time in Maui and Baja riding my kite and foil boards, but having too much fun here in the mountains right now.
Have you e-foiled yet?
I have not done the e-foil, but
you got to try
riding
it.
My foil behind the boat and on my kites for the last few years. And
I tried e-foiling this summer. It's so much fun because you don't need the boat. You don't need anything else. You just go.
I'll tell you what, I'll come e-foil with you. You come snowboard with me.
Done. All right. And last question for anyone trying to pursue their dreams, someone that is just getting going, whatever that might be. What's one piece of advice you either received or wish you received that can help you get that isn't something you hear all the time, like hard work, determination, great. But what's something unique that you think could take away?
I think the cliche of if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. There's a lot of truth to that. And so, yes, that is, in response to your question, the hard work and the commitment. I think for me, I really enjoyed doing it. And when I enjoy something, again, another cliche, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And really, I loved snowboarding. I loved the culture. I loved the people. I loved being out in the mountains at the mercy of Mother Nature. I loved the whole darn thing. And that really led to me wanting to be better at it, wanting to do better, wanting to get faster, wanting to improve my technique, my equipment, every aspect that makes you great in that sport. And I think just finding something you're really passionate about, you enjoy, you're not just saying it, like you're interested in it, you love it.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And for me, as an organ transplant recipient, as an Olympic medalist, you don't win an Olympic medal by yourself. You don't get through an organ transplant successfully without a great team behind you. So not only do you need to find something you're passionate about, you really enjoy and is really fun for you, but you also need to somehow surround yourself with people that share that vision and that goal, and have a great team of friends, of coworkers, of employees, whatever it is, family, friends that maybe share in that goal and that you can do it together. Because none of us succeed alone. And as a transplant recipient, no one knows that better than me.
Amen. Well, Chris, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on HawkeTalk.
You bet, Erik. Love catching up with you and look forward to making some turns, hopefully this winter.
Me as well. Really excited about it, actually.
Yeah, let's do it. Get your new Burton gear. Let's get out there.
Amen.
You've been listening to the Hawke Media podcast. To ensure that you never miss an episode, make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.